The night everything unraveled started like any other Sunday dinner, quiet tension hidden beneath forced smiles and polished plates. I remember watching my mother carefully slice the roast, her hands steady in a way that used to comfort me. My father sat at the head of the table, talking loudly about property taxes, as if volume alone could make him sound honest. And my grandmother, she just stared at her plate, blinking slowly, her once sharp eyes now clouded by Alzheimer's. Everyone treated her like she wasn't fully there anymore. Everyone except me, because even in her silence, I could feel something was wrong. Something deeper than illness, something that didn't belong in this house. It began months earlier, when Grandma started forgetting small things, where she put her glasses, the names of neighbors, what day it was. At first, it felt natural. Sad, but natural. Then suddenly, my parents took control of everything. Her bank accounts, her property documents, her medical decisions. They said it was for her safety. They said she needed protection. But what I saw wasn't protection, it was control. Tight, calculated, and disturbingly efficient. And every time I asked questions, I got the same cold response: you don't understand what she needs. One afternoon, I overheard my parents whispering in the kitchen. I wasn't meant to hear it, but their voices carried through the hallway. My father mentioned a number, 320. My mother laughed softly and said, she won't even remember signing it. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what exactly they had done, but I knew it wasn't right. I confronted them that evening, but they brushed it off, saying it was just insurance paperwork. They made me feel ridiculous for even asking. And for a moment, I almost believed them. But then I noticed changes in Grandma. She started asking about money, her savings, her rainy day fund, as she used to call it. She seemed confused, even distressed, like she knew something had been taken but couldn't piece together what. And that confusion, it haunted me. Because Alzheimer's takes memories, yes, but it doesn't erase instincts. Somewhere deep inside her, she knew something was wrong. And no one was listening. Weeks passed, and I tried to dig deeper. I checked public records, bank statements I could access, anything that might give me clarity. What I found didn't make sense. Large withdrawals, property transfers, documents signed in shaky handwriting that didn't resemble hers at all. It was like watching a quiet heist unfold in slow motion, right inside our home. And the worst part, no one else seemed to notice. Or maybe they chose not to. I felt alone, trapped between what I suspected and what I could prove. My parents had built a wall of authority around themselves, using Grandma's illness as both shield and weapon. Every time I tried to question them, they turned it around, accusing me of being insensitive, of not understanding the disease, of causing unnecessary stress. They made me feel like the villain in my own story. And for a while, I stayed quiet, because I didn't know how to fight something I couldn't fully see. Then came the call from Grandpa. He had been living out of state for years, visiting only occasionally. But his voice that day was different, sharp, alert, and filled with something I hadn't heard in a long time: urgency. He asked me one simple question: has anything unusual happened with your grandmother's finances? My heart raced. I hesitated, unsure how much to say. But something in his tone told me he already knew more than he was letting on. I told him everything. There was a long silence on the other end. Then he said, calmly, I'll be there Sunday. That Sunday felt heavier than any before. My parents didn't know he was coming. I didn't tell them. I just watched the clock, waiting. Dinner was already on the table when the doorbell rang. My father frowned, annoyed at the interruption. My mother wiped her hands nervously before opening the door. And when she saw him, when she saw Grandpa standing there, holding a worn leather folder under his arm, her face lost all color. He walked in without waiting for an invitation. Grandpa didn't greet anyone. He didn't sit. He simply placed the folder on the dining table, right between the plates, and looked directly at my parents. The room fell silent, thick with something unspoken but undeniable. Grandma looked up, her eyes flickering with a strange recognition, as if she sensed something important was about to happen. And then Grandpa said quietly, we need to talk. The air shifted the moment Grandpa opened that folder. It wasn't just paper inside, it was truth, heavy and undeniable, spilling onto the dinner table like a storm finally breaking. My father tried to laugh it off at first, waving his hand dismissively as if this were some dramatic misunderstanding. My mother avoided eye contact, her fingers tightening around her glass. But Grandpa didn't react. He simply pulled out the first document and slid it across the table. It was a bank statement. Not just any statement, one showing a transfer of $320,000 from Grandma's account. The date was recent, the authorization signature, shaky, uneven, barely legible. My father's smile faded. That's for her care, he said quickly, his voice no longer steady. Grandpa didn't respond. He pulled out another paper. Then another. Property deeds, power of attorney forms, withdrawal slips, each one carefully organized, each one telling the same story from a different angle. This wasn't care. This was calculated. I watched my parents crumble in slow motion. Grandpa finally spoke, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut through every excuse forming in the room. You thought distance made me blind, he said. You thought her illness made her invisible. But you forgot one thing. He tapped the folder lightly. I never stopped paying attention. My mother tried to interrupt, her voice trembling as she insisted they were only managing things for Grandma's benefit. But Grandpa raised his hand, silencing her instantly. Then he turned to me. For months, I've been getting alerts from accounts that were never supposed to change, he explained. Accounts I set up decades ago. Safeguards your grandmother didn't even know about. My chest tightened. That meant, he had been watching this entire time. Quietly, carefully, waiting. I needed proof, he continued. Not suspicion, not feelings, proof. And now, it was all right there, spread across the table like a verdict. Grandma suddenly spoke. It wasn't loud, it wasn't even clear, but it was enough to stop everyone. That's my money, she said softly, her voice fragile but certain. We all turned to her. For a moment, her confusion seemed to lift, replaced by something raw and real. I saved that, for us. Tears filled her eyes, and that single sentence hit harder than any document ever could. Because in that moment, her awareness cut through the illness like light through fog. My father stood up abruptly, anger flashing across his face. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You're turning this into something it's not. But even he didn't believe his own words anymore. The confidence was gone, the control had slipped, and for the first time, he looked afraid. Grandpa didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. I've already spoken to a lawyer, he said, each word deliberate. And a financial investigator. Everything here has been reviewed. He paused, letting that sink in. You didn't just take advantage of her condition. You forged documents. You manipulated assets. You stole. The word hung in the air, heavy and inescapable. Stole. Not managed. Not protected. Stole. My mother broke first. Her composure shattered as tears spilled down her face. She tried to explain, to justify, to twist the narrative into something softer. But nothing she said could erase the evidence sitting inches away. Nothing could undo the damage already done. And deep down, she knew it. I felt something shift inside me too. For months, I had doubted myself. Questioned my instincts. Wondered if I was overreacting. But now, watching everything unfold, I realized the truth had been there all along. I just needed someone strong enough to bring it into the light. And Grandpa had done exactly that. The dinner ended without another bite being taken. Grandpa gathered his papers slowly, carefully placing them back into the folder like pieces of a puzzle finally completed. He helped Grandma to her feet, his touch gentle, protective. As they walked toward the door, he stopped beside me. You saw it before anyone else, he said quietly. Don't ever ignore that kind of instinct again. Then he left. And just like that, everything changed. In the weeks that followed, legal actions moved quickly. Accounts were frozen, properties were reviewed, investigations deepened. My parents, once so confident in their control, now faced consequences they never expected. And Grandma, she was moved somewhere safe, somewhere she could be cared for without being used. But what stayed with me the most wasn't the legal outcome. It was that moment at the table. The silence, the truth, the way everything hidden finally came into the open. Because sometimes, justice doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes, it walks in quietly, carrying a folder.